Well, Jeannie, right now, the number of ICU beds available is alarming to some healthcare workers. Data shows that Northeast Florida counties are nearing 90% capacity. And some hospitals are making preparations ahead of the holiday weekend, where typically in any given year, hospitals do expect an influx of people. On your side's Troy Klesch joins us live tonight from UF Health to break down the numbers and show us what they mean. Troy?
Thank you, Heather. Well, here at UF Health, they say that they are reaching closer to the peak that of COVID patients total that they saw back in the summer was when they had their highest number of 111 at any given time. Now, they say that these numbers are concerning going into the new year. UF Health with the largest number of ICU beds available, 30 of those beds with COVID-19 patients. As a whole, Northeast Florida has more than 12% of its ICU beds available across 7 counties. Dr. Chad Nielsen at UF Health Jacksonville watching the numbers.
Within the Jacksonville, the Northeast Florida region, that is fairly high. If you look at Clay County, which they have a lot less ICU beds than we do, they're about 96% full in their ICUs right now. So that's certainly something that's concerning.
He says their hospital has opened a surge capacity unit just in case. Hospitals having to account for ICU beds available not just to COVID patients, but people taking elective surgeries. Duval County currently has more than 10% of ICU beds available, a number that is fluid according to doctors at Baptist Health.
Luckily, we're not seeing the dramatic increases that other parts of the country are, which is a good thing, but definitely the numbers are continuing to go up. We do feel confident in our ability to continue to take care of both COVID patients.
Stocking up on PPE, at least one measure to protect healthcare workers. With a vaccine here, some say the country is not out of the woods yet. Now, doctors say as this vaccine rollout begins, they want to remind people that it will still be months before it's available to the general public, which is why, and part of the reason why, they are encouraging the celebrations for people to stay at home tonight. We're live at downtown Jacksonville. Troy Klesch, First Coast News, on your side.
Keep following all those safety precautions.